Hello everyone, welcome to Winthrop in the World. I'm Paul Baskin, and with us today is Terence Delehanty. Terry is the former police chief here in town from 2009 to 2020-24. You're now the assistant head of security at Endicott College up in Beverly?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Welcome to the show, and
thank
you for doing this.
I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, no, we're glad to hear from you.
Look forward to it.
Lot going on in town, and I'm waiting for a while to have a chance to hear from you and sort of get your take on a few things. I mean, if you would maybe just, I know you, the other thing worth mentioning, of course, is you were the interim town manager at least twice, right?
Twice, yes. I was, didn't learn the first time, so they made me a second time.
Yeah.
And I certainly learned, a lot in that position as well. It was a unique opportunity for me to really dive into the government side of things and the budgeting and everything else. So
right.
I enjoyed it, but I was also happy to go back to the police chief's position.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think maybe I would actually like to ask you about the town more generally, and definitely about the police as we get along, but just in terms of the town more generally, you're obviously a resident here in town. What's your degree of confidence in sort of the town's overall budgetary health these days in terms of where it's going? And there's a lot of talk about whether we need to diversify the town in terms of some of the the way the income is coming into it. Just what's your big picture sense? Yeah.
So Winthrop has never had so much of a stable financial picture. My entire career, 32 years as a police officer, Winthrop has never been really able to do it alone based on the taxable property values that we have here in Winthrop. Since about the 1980s, Winthrop has been subsidized by Massport.
Okay.
And then later by the MWRA as well. So if you're looking at just on your tax base, without those other entities contributing, Massport in lieu of tax revenue, and of course mitigation agreement for MWRA.
Deer Island.
Yeah, and the old Deer Island. Yeah. Okay. Yes, correct. So if you take those two entities out, Winthrop could not sustain its current financial picture.
Okay. Period.
Overrides are only good for so long.
Okay, and you're referring to the fact that we just had a vote not too long ago to override Prop 2.5.
Well, I would actually refer to the 2009 override.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Where we laid off the police chief, we laid off other employees within government. We had no police chief for about 6 months until the override passed, and then the community stepped up and voted for the override in 2009. We've seen along the way debt exclusions to build schools. Those are not done based on tax base, right? Those are additional votes that are needed from the taxpayer to supplement the overall income of the town. So we can only raise our taxes 2.5% year over year. And when you exceed that, you need to go to the voters, right? Mm-hmm. So along the way, we've had these debt exclusions. We get another debt exclusion for the firehouse recently, and also an override for the schools. How long is that going to last? What's the money? Where it's going to be spent? Everyone has negotiations. Everyone's entitled to a pay raise at some level. What that pay raise looks like, what their working conditions look like, are certainly up to the individual departments, school being one, and the town manager being the other, who negotiate those. But for everyone to sit here in Winthrop and say, we're never going to give anyone any more than they're making now, is a fallacy. It's how we pay for that. Okay. So yes, there's going to be times where we're going to be up against the wall, where the taxpayers are going to have to make decisions whether to do the override or to lay off basic services.
Right, but as far as the town's fundamental status, though, can it keep going the way it is, or is there somehow need to be something really fundamentally different, like a new sort of source of businesses in town, or some way of?
Well, you'd love to have a new source of commercial tax base in town, but Winthrop's not built for that. Okay. So you don't have the luxury as Chelsea, a Revere, a Boston. And you see Boston suffering right now after COVID. Whole downtown's changed, right? All those commercial buildings are no longer in existence. They're transforming them to housing. Right. So you see the commercial base everywhere starting to shrink down. So to say that we'll have another opportunity or avenue, geographically, if we look at Winthrop, we're pretty built out. So where do you have room for more housing or more building is a question in Winthrop. We also have flooding conditions in Winthrop. So we don't, you never want to see a new development in a flood zone unless you elevate it. And certainly there's options to do that. But again, where we're flooding, I think we need to solve the flooding issues. Right. And we've been working on those for a good part of my career too. Ingleside Park, right. Pico. People over in Pico have year after year suffered. They're resilient people, and they usually help themselves and then call fire departments in for assistance when it gets really bad.
So what do we do then? What sort of fundamentally does the town need to do to change its status quo in order to make itself sustainable, economically at least for the medium to long term?
So the medium. I'd say medium. Long term, I don't see any other way economically to be sustainable without additional overrides. Okay. It's just the way Winthrop is built, right? Years ago, we made some drastic budgetary mistakes of counting mitigation money to offset our budgets. Okay. And now we're trapped in using that year after year after year after year for basic government services. By
mitigation money, you refer to what, flood mitigation money? Or
mitigation money meaning MWRA or Massport money.
I see. You're talking about that money?
Yep, those monies specifically.
So an override is a sort of a tactical response. I guess that still requires taxpayers here to pay. I'm asking is there a way to sort of solve the town's fundamental mismatch in terms of revenues and needs in terms of its overall budget? Is it?
Well, I think you got to look at what's available to you, and then obviously try to attract, other people into Winthrop. But Winthrop is, if you were an educational institute, a Harvard, a BC, wherever you want to name, right? BU, and we want you to come to Winthrop. Would you come? Knowing the traffic in the morning? Right. It's hard to get in, hard to get out. You're not on the T, right on the bus. We got the bus line, but you don't have a transit station. Right. It's difficult. So we've tried those techniques over the years. Yeah. Jim McKenna, who was the town manager a couple of years ago there, was trying to get and lure people in. Jim Lettieri was the council vice president at the time. Phil Boncory was the president. They tried to get the biotech industry in to look at the middle school. And they were unable to succeed on getting people into Winthrop to offset some of our financial challenges, I'll call them.
Okay. So then what then is, you're reiterating, doing a good job of reiterating the problem, so I'm just trying to get at what do you see as a sort of a strategy for breaking out of it?
Well, I think it's going to take a community to come together. I think it's going to take people who are smarter than me in the finance office and in the town manager's office to move the town forward. But first, in order to give them that flexibility to think outside the box and start to explore where Winthrop is going to be in a 5, 10, 15-year increments, we need to stop the infighting.
Okay, so talk about that if you would. What do you? I was going to ask you about that, but maybe since you're raising it, what do you see when you talk about the infighting? What does it look like to you, and what do you see as a solution to it?
Well, I think we got to agree to disagree. Yeah. And instead of dragging people through the mud on the internet. I'm not an internet person, and I see it from all sides. Right. The personal attacks. Right. And then that ties down the town manager. Some councilors get involved, some don't get involved in those discussions online. But I think we need to stop, take a breath, and say what's best for Winthrop. I don't see that happening. I see that there's a no group and a yes group, and they're locked in. Right. And there's got to be something in the middle.
Right. And when you say no and yes, you're referring, I believe, primarily to 3A, which is at least the way it's manifesting in town is 3A, the housing law that essentially requires.
That would just be one example.
Okay. What else?
Yeah. So there's a lot of disagreement. Yeah. That's a lot of disagreement and tension. of who gets to say what at a council meeting and whether people can wear a certain hat in a council meeting, how they talk to one another in a council meeting. And, I strongly believe that we should be respectful. That's my personal take. But there's also a SJC decision that says,
Supreme Judicial Court.
Yeah, Supreme Judicial Court decision that says there's no decency code at public meetings.
So where do you see, who needs to move first, I guess, or where are you looking for to see the change that you described?
An election.
An election, okay. Well,
I think that's where we have to start.
Yeah.
And I think that, because right now it's impossible to bring anyone together.
Yeah.
During an election. I've served through many of these elections.
Right.
I've seen them go perfectly smooth, and I've seen them go off the rails, and where people getting criminally charged and brought into court and everything else. So I think we have to get through the election period. Certainly I think, and hopefully that people might be watching this will consider this, is to say we're going to stay respectful to one another. We're not going to attack one another. We're not going to attack anyone's family during my campaigning.
Right.
And I'm going to try to earn this the good way, and the old way, shaking hands and meeting people where they're at and explaining my positions. And give the people their choice. You get 2 choices or 3 choices. The people should vote and make their choices based on their own personal beliefs.
So 3A, the housing law, has been a center point for a lot of this. And one question, I have a lot of things I want to ask you about, but one in particular is, do you think it's really about 3A and the question, is that really what people are so worked up about, or is it sort of a cover for something else that is really sort of bothering people in town? And if so, what might that be?
Well, I think, it depends on what side of 3A you're on. I think there's 2 sides that I've been looking at and listening to at meetings and stuff like that. So there's one side, I think, feels that the state has overstepped and they shouldn't be telling us what to do.
Yeah.
And there's certainly the other side that says, hey, listen, the planning board has put together a great draft for us to adopt, and we should be adopting that.
Right, which is the side you represented at a meeting several months ago. Is that's
well,
correct?
I didn't represent either side.
Okay.
I have my own beliefs in this, and my own beliefs is that you should adopt something so we're not ineligible to submit applications to grants.
Right.
And then fight all you want afterwards.
Right.
Bring it to court, bring it to the federal court, to the state court, put pressure on our legislative branch to change the law, but not doing anything and prohibiting us from applying for grants is not the right answer. Winthrop has never, ever, ever been able to do it alone.
Right. So what's your sense as to why that argument that you've been raising is falling maybe to some degree on deaf ears? What's behind it, I guess?
I think people have their own personal beliefs that they don't believe, and one of them, might be our state representative, which I'm a dear friend of, and he's a dear friend of mine. But sometimes we don't see things the same way.
Well, that's what I was getting at, though. Is it really a belief that we're somehow going to convince the state to back off on 3A, or is there something else that's at play there? I mean, I'm sorry, maybe I'll be a little more direct. Is it because there's really a sense in the town that we should just not have, new people in town, and that's the town should stay the way it is, and we shouldn't be having new people come in, or is it because there's a fear that somehow Winthrop in 5 years might look like Revere Beach, full of condos, or what's really your best sense as to why this level of
Well, my best sense is that there might be a combination of everything that you just mentioned, based on the person who's perceiving it, right? It might be because they don't want to look like Revere Beach, and certainly neither do I. I don't want to see these tall high rises all over town either. Right. But if you believe the plan that was put forward, and I do, if you believe the town manager, in which I do, this is paper compliance that would allow us to at least apply for these grants and become eligible for them. Without that first move of being able to comply, you will never get a grant. So for people to say that, well, we never got those grants anyway.
Right.
We have gotten grants in the past. We've got the TIP project up on Revere Street right now.
Yes.
We've got drainage projects for the center.
Right.
A ton of money. I think it was $13.5 million in grant money there. Right. So there's a large amount of money that we constantly go to the well for.
There is a lot, but the state representative, Jeff Turco, that you were referencing, has answered that by saying, well, that was because we got a lot of money back when Robert DeLeo was the Speaker of the House, and Winthrop got a lot of legislation, but those days are past, and the new reality now is that Winthrop just shouldn't expect a lot of money from the state, so this is an easy thing or relatively easy thing to say no to.
But we don't know unless we're able to apply.
Yeah, and okay. So,
and I think Jeff Turco's, Representative Turco's comments was, he almost wishes that people would pass something to say, see, you're still not eligible for those grants. And I would agree, let's pass something.
Is the town government being, so one of the reasons I'm going to ask this one is because there is to some degree some concern that the town is not applying for enough state money to begin with. It just got not too long ago an assistant town manager who was in charge of doing this. It looks like even the assistant town manager has a lot of other duties being thrown her way, not necessarily able to do that. Do you feel like the town is right now in a position to get the state money that it needs to get if 3A weren't in the way?
I think so. Yes. Police department applies for grants all the time. The fire department applies for grants. There's Chapter 90 money through the DPW director who applies for those grants. So there's other grant money available. When I was at the town manager's office, we brought people in to write certain grants for a certain submission, and we certainly can do that. But back to my point where you said, well, the town manager and the assistant town manager is not able to do this is because they're too busy refereeing fights. Yeah. And if we get that off their plate, then we can start to move the town forward. Government can move forward, but I don't see that happening until we have an election.
Okay, so what about again, going back to the fact that the town somehow needs to increase revenues, are the people concerned about growth in Winthrop right to look at that and say, well, that means the only solution to helping Winthrop's economic woes or economic situations, woes maybe too strong a term, but economic situation is to somehow do something different, either build up new businesses or somehow do something in a way that's going to really fundamentally change the character of the town. Is that a real concern? Well,
we had the whole Center Business District looked at back in 2014, I believe it was, and we came up with zoning. And then we have a master plan. Where do we stand with that master plan? How much have we accomplished from that master plan? Because all that was driving to making Winthrop more economically sound, right? The whole Center Business District plan. Right. So we've only gotten a little bit there. We've seen very little development in the center. So maybe we need to think about our processes and how people can get things done quicker. Whether you want to be a new business in town or you want to do new development in town, what does that development look like? Have clear and public meetings and conversations about that. But ultimately, these boards are doing hard work, and it ultimately goes to the council, and we get a 4-4 council.
Okay. Well,
because we couldn't agree on the 9th member.
Right.
So that's my point. Why couldn't people come together and agree on the 9th member? And certainly everyone, you hear meeting after meeting, come volunteer and you'll get rewarded. Come volunteer. Karen Chavez, not a personal friend, 40 years of volunteering. And she couldn't get appointed to the council. Strong, hard worker, ethical worker, budget season after budget season, and trust me, I had to go against her. As the police chief, she was a hard-nosed budget person. You had to convince her with data in order to get her to add something to your budget. And that, I understand there was a second person there. If it was me, I would have said, you know what, give it to Karen, I'm going to run in November, if it was me.
I believe you did say that.
I didn't hear that, but you could be correct.
Okay.
Because the council should have then appointed her, right?
Okay. Should we still have this form of government, or should we, become a city and have a mayor, or should we do something different in terms of how we're aligned?
I think any structure of government, or we came from the town meeting side of government, and that certainly didn't work because you had to wait so long to get anything approved.
Right.
You could only approve it twice a year.
Yeah.
So if an emergency happened, like the sinkhole up in Pleasant Street, to get money, you would have to call a town meeting. And have it voted at a special town meeting, and that's archaic in itself. Yeah. The town manager form of government I like because it professionalizes that. A mayor is just going to run to his constituents and his base, and give things to those neighborhoods that are his base, right? That's the way politicians work. In general.
So are you saying in so many words that maybe our system isn't the greatest, but it's better than the alternatives we can think of?
I think, yeah, but it's something if we're concerned about that, I think we should look at that.
There was talk of getting rid of precinct by precinct distinctions. Do you support that?
I don't.
You don't support that, okay.
No, but because, again, we're back to the same thing. One neighborhood could have over representation. Other neighborhoods will get no representation.
Yeah. Okay, so many things to go, but part of the disagreements you're talking about led to an effort to recall a member of the current town council. You played a role in that. How much can you tell us about? First of all, why were you as a former town manager and a former police chief brought in to help handle this question of how to handle a recall against a town council member?
Sure, I think my expertise in knowing the ordinances and the charters, specifically here in Winthrop, and working with them since the charter's inception, certainly made me uniquely distinctive than other attorneys around. I also believe that the town attorney had already given legal advice, and therefore could not now represent more people beyond who we already gave legal advice to.
Right. And there was a moment in that, as you are well aware, where the Board of Registrars of Voters intervened and took a side on this. Is there anything you can say about that and whether that board, what you think about that?
No,
board?
I would refer you back to the town manager or the town attorney, since they handled those meetings, and I wasn't involved in those meetings. Again, my brief I think speaks for itself at the SJC. It's publicly available, Supreme Judicial Court.
Right.
I think any answers around that, either need to ask the town manager, the town attorney, or refer to my brief.
What is that whole episode, though, setting aside, I guess, the legalities of that whole episode and the way it went down, and the fact that it's happened, and the way the town handled it, tell you about our ability in this town to govern ourselves?
Well, I think, I think no matter what town you're in, you're going to have these little skirmishes. So I think, yes, it's going to happen no matter where you are, to some extent.
Right.
But again, should we be looking at the provisions of the charter? Yeah. Specifically the recall position, and should we re-examine that?
Right.
Should we have to tweak that?
Right.
Those are the questions that come to my mind.
Yeah. Okay. Just one last thing on the 3A. There's some talk that if the town doesn't comply, I think there's people who are against complying think that the result will be that we just don't comply. There's some who warn that if we do this, the state, and the state has talked about this, I think, in other towns, could come in and just impose a map on us, a zoning map on us, because the state does ultimately hold the right to set zoning for all the cities and towns in Massachusetts. Are you concerned that that might happen in this town, where the state could come in and say, all right, you don't want to have multifamily, in certain places, we'll tell you where to put multifamily then?
Quite frankly, I don't know why that wasn't put in the original legislative act. So since they didn't put it in the original legislative act, they would actually have to either bring us to court and have someone appointed from the court to guide us through that process, right. Or go back to the legislators and have them amend the 3A law. Yeah. So there certainly could happen. But there's a process for that, right? And they would have to follow, the Attorney General's office would have to follow that process.
Okay.
I foresee them being able to tighten our purse strings even more to us. Mm-hmm. And they can do that without those two processes. Yeah. So, if we don't comply, will they get more stricter with what we're available? Will they take out Chapter 90 money so we can't fix potholes in sidewalks and curbs and stuff like that, right?
Or sea level rise.
Sea level rise, and those are the low-lying things that they could implement tomorrow if they wanted to. If we don't, so at that point, the town has another consideration to think over. But also, if people are not satisfied with the town council and not having the 3A pass, they do have other options.
Yeah. So, sea level rise, I want to ask you about that because it's a huge thing for town, obviously. We're batting around not only how we get state money to do it, but how we do it or what we do it. Is in a town like Winthrop that's, surrounded by the ocean, do we have to or should we create a map or some way of telling people based on where they live in town whether the town will ultimately defend their home against the sea, or tell you that no, in certain parts of town we just can't, and you just have to understand that's going to be the deal? Is there some way of sort of giving people of this town some kind of knowledge and assurance, or predictability maybe is the word, on their own properties, and where to expect it will go from here?
Well, I think they currently do that with the flood map, right?
Well, the map tells you what to expect. I'm asking is in terms of, we don't know what you're going to protect. Like people living on Morton Street to this day, I don't think know whether their homes could be bought out or not. I'm just asking, is that the kind of question that the town owes as an answer, a straight answer to the people of town? Your house here, yes, we will ultimately protect it, whatever it takes, and your home there, we won't, because it's just not.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the town's responsibility to do that. I think it's our responsibility as homeowners to ask that question, though, and to have a dialogue about that question.
Right.
Because I think the town has always stepped up. They brought sand on the Euro Beach.
Right.
They build the berms in the wintertime. The Winthrop Beach, because of Bob DeLeo, was redone.
Right.
And to take the velocity out of
Right.
it. There was someone, I think it's MIT, who was designing how to take wave action and bring it down before it hit the coastline.
Yeah.
And that's a pilot project that she's working on. I thought it was a great idea. I think it was on Chronicle not too long ago.
Okay.
Right? So you have other things we could do
Right.
that we have to explore. But again, we can't get there if we just have these skirmishes and worrying about other things. We're all in 3A, and we're forgetting about those people.
Right. I want to get into some stuff about police and fire. But one of the questions, of course, we're building a new fire station in town. Did the town make a mistake, if that's the word to use it, in any way by not having done as what some other towns have done, which is incorporate their police and fire into one big building and have sort of a public safety building, given the fact that the police station in town is, it's also maybe looking at some upgrades in the not too distant future? Should we have taken care of it all at once, I guess is what I ask the question.
If you're asking me, yes. And that does not take away the fact that the fire department needs a new station.
Right.
To me, yes, they should have asked the voters that. And they could have asked it as a menu item, like we've done overrides before in menu items.
Right.
As, do you want a fire station? Yes. Do you want a police station with that fire station? Right. Yes. So I think it became very political.
Yeah.
And certainly at the council level, they decided to cut the police out after years of meetings, after years of, I sat through meetings, developing and devising and going back and forth over where it should be and how it should be and who was going to be involved in it. So I know the police officers felt very disenfranchised.
Yeah. So what would you, if it was up to you to make a decision now on what to do about it, what would that be?
Well, I'm glad it's not. And, Tony Marino is handling it, I think, the best he can. And certainly he's already said there's going to be a phase 2. Yeah. And what does that phase 2 look like?
The town manager.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I should have said the town manager.
Yeah.
No disrespect to him.
Yeah.
But I think, he needs the support of the council again.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So he can only do so much without the council support because they have to actually vote it to go on the ballot.
Right, but do you think there would be support? I mean, it took a bit to get support in town just for the fire station. Do you think there would actually realistically be, if we had said to the town, or if the town council had said to the town, add another 20 million or whatever the amount would be to include a police in it, would that have flown in this town, you think?
I think so. I think the first field override was more about location than anything else.
Yeah, okay. Also on the police, a big issue, though, maybe it seems to have settled down, I don't know, to some degree in town, which is the federal immigration enforcement. We had the one episode in town a while ago where the agents came in town and took away a couple of people. I don't know if there's been any other cases since then, but I mean, what's your general take on how the police should respond to that kind of challenge that we have coming from the federal government, if you even think it's a challenge, and how well we are doing on that.
Yeah, so I think it is a challenge. It's a challenge not just here in Winthrop, but throughout the state. You see the attacks that have been levied upon the mayor of Boston by the Homeland Security and Immigration Enforcement units. Again, that creates discourse too, and I think we should have a conversation instead of getting on cameras and barking back and forth at people. Certainly, I think the police department is handling it very efficiently and effectively with the leadership of John Goodwin. But again, I think it's very complicated. So if you're going to come after criminals, that's something everyone can get behind and support. But there's a lot of people here, are good, hard-working people that came to the United States under other administrations that allowed them to come in. Whether they crossed the border legally, illegally, they allowed it to happen. That, I think, has to be looked at. And how do we have a streamlined process for those families that are here that are not criminals? And what does that look like? And then, you get the borders closed down, and now you start working on those processes and seeing how you can streamline them so you're not affecting kids. So, I think everyone in town will probably know several families that their kids have played with each other that might not be here legally. Hardworking parents, hardworking kids, that's not fair, in my opinion. It's not fair. Criminals, gang members, that's who they should be going after.
Yeah. So if you were still the chief of police in Winthrop, and we have had the current chief on to ask versions of this question, and you got a call from federal, ICE or whatever, and they said, hey, we're coming into your town in a half an hour, we're going to do this, that, and the other thing. What's the best answer you can give to how you would deal with a situation like that?
Well, I think it's, I think our job is to make sure it's peacefully done as possible. So I think our involvement is to make sure that they see a friendly face here in Winthrop, and that we're not arresting you for a civil detainer. If you're arrested by us, it's a crime, and then you'll be brought to the Winthrop Police Station. So again, it's a complicated question and problem, because we're getting advisories, and I say we, meaning the police departments, are getting advisories saying if you do not assist or help, you could be subject to federal charges for interfering with. So it becomes a very complicated. So I think our job is to keep the peace, keep the neighborhood peaceful, restore peace if it's broken after they leave, but not to get in their way, not to interfere with them, and certainly to make sure everyone understands that our role is very, very specific and targeted. And we're not here. We have a lot of great people. I was on my way out of town one day, and there was a person on a scooter, and she ended up hitting the curb and flying off the scooter. I got out. She begged me not to call the police, and she didn't speak much English. She begged me. I said, no, I'll have him come down. The police department sent a Spanish-speaking officer down. He was able to calm her down, explain that nothing's going to happen to her. We just wanted to get her help. So those types of incidences go a long way to show the Winthrop Police Department's efforts to be diversified, also to show that they're caring about people that might be in this limbo status.
Do you have any concern that doing that you might get a call in a month, or I mean, obviously not you now, but the police might get a call from somebody in Washington saying, hey, we heard this is how you guys handled that, we don't like that?
Yeah, I'd say, well, you don't run the police department. We can't get in your way, but you don't get to dictate to us how to run our police department. But again, going backwards, they do control the purse strings. So they can limit grant money coming into the Winthrop Police Department. UASI is a perfect example. I think we get about $500,000 a year for police and fire. Out of the UASI group, Urban Area Security Initiative.
Is that federal money?
That's federal money. Whether Boston's the fiduciary on that federal money, and whether or not we'll see that coming through this administration for next year is a big question, and that's another $500,000 off the table.
Well, former Chief Terry Delehanty, thank you very much for taking the time today. It was really interesting to hear from you.
No, I appreciate your time and your questions, and thank you for everyone for listening. Hopefully I don't get much hate mail.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.